Mr. Director, you previously told us that you consider the situation on the southern border to be a massive security threat to our country. Is that still your assessment?
I stand by my prior testimony, and in fact, just in the last month or so, we've conducted a significant series of arrests. I say we, our Joint Terrorism Task Force is working with ICE of a number of individuals with suspected international terrorism ties. And I have also been very vocal about the fact that and this is really since the last time I appeared before you, that we are increasingly concerned about the possibility not just of a foreign terrorist-inspired attack, which is very much a concern, but even the potential for a coordinated foreign terrorist attack, perhaps like what we've seen against the concert hall in Russia, for example, but just here in the United States.
Well, the 19 suicide bombers who overstayed visas were responsible for 3,000 American deaths on 9/11. What's your best estimate of the number of foreign terrorists who are now in our country?
I don't know that I could give you that number. What I can tell you is we have lots of foreign terrorism-related investigations, but that doesn't mean that all of them came in, illegally or anything like that.
It seems to me that the simplest act of terrorism would be for dozens of guerrillas to attack low-security, high-density venues, for example, Friday night high school football games all across the country at the same hour. With bombs and automatic weapons, that would produce thousands of casualties from coast to coast in a matter of minutes. How likely is such a scenario?
Well, what you're describing would require, of course, a lot of coordination. But what I will tell you, and I think you're onto a particularly important point from my perspective, which is that unlike the 9/11 attacks, which again, I was in FBI headquarters on the day of 9/11, and so I remember it vividly, and I've spent plenty of time in the period after that in my prior positions engaged with the families and the victims. But what we're seeing more and more with the foreign terrorist threat, and frankly also the domestic terrorism threat, is a focus on kind of like what you're talking about, well, what I would call soft targets, which is really for the American people's benefit, just intelligence community speak for where everyday people live their everyday lives.
What terrorist groups have now infiltrated our country that you're tracking?
Well, I don't know that I would say infiltrated. We have investigations as we speak that relate to ISIS and its affiliates. We have investigations as we speak that relate to Al-Qaeda. We have investigations as we speak that relate to Al-Shabaab. We have investigations as we speak that relate to the Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, and so frankly, even the IRGC Quds Force itself.
What foreign criminal gangs are now in our country that you're most concerned with?
Well, foreign criminal gangs, we obviously have investigations, a lot of investigations into, gangs like MS-13, for example, and some of its counterparts. Although I think if you were to talk to most chiefs and sheriffs like I'm doing every week, we shouldn't underestimate how prevalent neighborhood gangs are, really. It's a lot of the gang violence that...
Well, I'm concerned about those that we've allowed in through the southern border and what threat they are now posing. Do you believe that the vetting performed at the southwest border is adequate to ensure that aliens with terrorist or criminal gang ties are not being released into the United States?
Well, it's not really for me to speak to the vetting. What I would tell you is that...
you have to deal with it once they're released into the United States.
And one of the concerns that I have, which I touched on briefly in my opening, is there's been a lot of focus on the number of known or suspected terrorists encountered at the border. And that number has increased over the last 5 or 6 years, and that should be of concern. But frankly, to me, the bigger concern is individuals who weren't either weren't on the watch list at the time they came in because there wasn't information known yet that ties them to terrorism, and it's only after they get in that some new piece of information developed somewhere overseas, and now we know.
That's
a bigger concern.
We've been warned that they basically vet against a blank sheet of paper. If they don't have a record in this country, Border Patrol probably doesn't have any record. They're releasing it in the country, and you find out later of the dangers.
Right, or if they use fake documents and there aren't biometrics to connect them. Sometimes there are people who come in who, because of the nature of the threat information that puts somebody on the watch list, there wasn't, fingerprints from the person at the time, because not every piece of intelligence comes with fingerprints. So then the guy comes in using fake ID,
and of course,
there's no reason to connect them.
And of course, the 2 million gotaways you know absolutely nothing about.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know about absolutely nothing, because we may come across them in other things. I mean, one of the key parts of our collective defense here is that we work with 800,000 sworn law enforcement across the country, and we train them on the right questions to ask and things like that, so that we can build in additional eyes and ears if they, do a traffic stop or whatever happens to be. We run a greater chance of leveraging all that to pick up people who may have slipped through the cracks.